Well, welcome to episode 5 of the whatisyourworldview.com podcast. I have a slight confession for this one. Because my day job is teaching in a high school, and at the moment I'm preparing a unit of work on peace and conflict for the year 7s, I thought why not try and combine my energies and get an opportunity to interview someone who has a pacifist perspective. And one of the organisations that was listed for us to research was Pax Christi, who are a Catholic organisation that began in 1945, after World War II obviously, with the aim of trying to develop peace, reconciliation, nuclear disarmament, all sorts of other issues all wrapped up within their Catholic social teaching aims. Thank you so much to Aisling Griffin for letting me interview her. Really interesting talking to someone who has a pacifist perspective. One of the personal reflections to come out of this interview, and something I've been thinking about quite a lot lately, is how addicted to violence our culture is. And it's quite an interesting shift to start to think of, well, how do we achieve things without using muscle and might? How do we achieve aims against groups that seem so strong without using force?
We do a lot of work looking at kind of the arms trade. We look at nuclear weapons. We kind of work in solidarity with our partners in Israel-Palestine. And then we also focus on non-violence and what it means to be peacemakers. And my role in particular is doing kind of education work, so trying to bring that message of peace and those tools of peacemaking out into kind of the wider world.
The actual history of Pax Christi is quite interesting. It kicked off as World War II ended. Yeah,
so really one of the kind of the words we talk a lot about is reconciliation, and that's where we really came from. So that idea of, at the end of the Second World War, there was a lot of hurt, there was a lot of pain. But also people, saw their neighbours, particularly, for example, France and Germany, as their enemies. So really, we were set up by a bishop and a laywoman, and the laywoman set up some prayer groups to pray for their German neighbours, to kind of really bring about the idea of, actually, these aren't our enemies. These are people just like us, and they're hurting just like us. And how do we come together to make sure that we don't get into that situation where we're at war again? How do we come together to work for peace? How do we forgive each other? How do we move forward?
Reconciliation is quite a loaded word, isn't it? And sometimes it gets misunderstood as being simply wiping the slate clean and moving on. I often use the example of those synchronized swimmers that you might get, where they're very much in harmony with each other under the water. So that it's not just simply saying, okay, let bygones be bygones, or I forgive you for that thing. It's about trying to forge a harmonious relationship, which I suppose is what they were doing by praying for each other. Is that right?
Definitely kind of mending that kind of brokenness, I suppose. And, we talk about mending a relationship and looking to see how you can work together in the future. So yeah, I think that's a really nice idea, those swimmers. And I think it's important to note as well that it doesn't necessarily mean that you kind of ignore the things that take you apart. I think it's important to look at where you are together and move forward together, recognising the other.
One of the things that I've said about this model of trying to understand other people's perspectives that we try to model in this podcast, one of the qualities that I've said in it that's really important is the idea of transparency. You might have an accurate and a generous perspective of the other person, but I think sometimes being open about where you're at, which is precisely what you're saying is kind of at the heart of reconciliation. You need to be clear, okay, you were a scumbag to me. You did that horrible thing. You need to know that I don't like that. But, to sort of ignore that, and everyone smooths everything over, but there's massive cracks underneath the surface. You can't really do that,
definitely.
Can you?
No, because I think that just causes more resentment, more hurt, and then potentially more conflict, more violence or upset or kind of anger. Yeah, it's important to kind of recognise what the hurt is. Sometimes you just have to accept it, kind of it is what it is, but looking at how you can move forward, I think is really important. Move forward constructively to build something better from that.
I mean, I work as a high school teacher, so I hang out a lot with teenagers. And the great thing about teenagers is that they are often quite blunt about how they feel about things. And I think as grown-ups, we tend to be quite good at papering over the cracks and presenting ourselves in a very sort of polite way. But actually a teenager will often... So I had a teenager say to me today that my lesson was boring. which is sort of hilarious. I think he was probably right, but there is something about being blunt about where you're at. Yeah, obviously teenagers could probably learn to be more generous in the way they say it, but passions are passions, aren't they? And if you've been hurt by something, you do need to be open about that.
I think there is also something in learning how to express our emotions and our opinions, isn't it? Often I've read quite a bit about this idea of I statements. So often when we're angry, we're like, oh, you do this and you're like that and you. But actually, we sometimes need to look back and think, well, I feel when that happened that trying to learn how to manage conflict and confrontation and things is really important in starting to work for that. To not make that hurt worse, I suppose, isn't it? You know, you want to reconcile, you don't want to end up even further away than you were originally.
In an introduction to one of these lessons that I've been planning for my year sevens, I've made the statement that we live in a beautiful yet broken world. A group like Pax Christi, and in fact any group that seeks reconciliation and peace in a world like ours, you are wading neck deep in an absolute mess, aren't you?
That's definitely one way to put it.
But you seem quite a friendly and cheerful person. Surely it's pretty depressing stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be, definitely. You know, there's definitely days, you know, I spent days kind of reading about different weapons or different conflicts, and it can be hard. But I think ultimately it's the idea of the hope that I think it can be better. You know, there is an alternative. You know, there are so many amazing stories around the world of people who are working together in communities, working for peace. In Afghanistan, you've got the Afghan peace volunteers who are kind of young people who are kind of working in their local community to support each other and to work for peace. So I think there's a level at which, whilst it's difficult, it's the recognition that I do believe it's possible. There are other people doing that work as well. You know, it's not just us. You know, there are people all around the world doing it. And for some people, you know, there is that faith perspective. You know, they believe in a higher being, and maybe that's where it comes from. And that idea of religion, for I think some people, gives them maybe support, kind of bigger perspective, perhaps. It's about sharing and it's about community, I think, is the important thing. If you've got people who are also surround you and supporting you, it's a lot easier to be kind of cheerful and positive. Because I think sometimes we get very caught up in that, you know, I need to do this. But actually, it's, you know, we need to do it together. It's bigger than that.
So can we dig into the work of Pax Christi for a few moments? And in particular, I'd like to look at the issue of technology and its misuse. I grew up in an age where Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Two Tribes was blaring out when I was a teenager, and the fear of America and the Soviet Union having a nuclear war. That doesn't seem to be such a thing that's in the public conscious now. I mean, I'm 50. A teenager now probably doesn't think about nuclear warfare as much as I did when I was a teenager. But they do think about things like drones. I mean, drones are a very popular thing nowadays. They're, you know, consumer level technology. Yeah. But drones are being used in warfare situations. And I know that Pax Christi has some involvement with both of those issues.
It's the same thing that I think underpins a lot of our work. You know, this idea of our faith that we're called to work for peace. You know, I think when we look at nuclear weapons, they're just incredibly destructive. We've only seen them really used in warfare twice, but, you know, kind of hundreds of thousands were killed. And today it's even, you know, stronger. Our capabilities are getting bigger. And so I think we look at it from the idea of actually the humanitarian cost is just unbelievable. There's also ideas around, you know, the environmental effect of that would be catastrophic as well. And so I think it's just looking at this idea as well of, does that make us safer? Having these weapons that just are so catastrophic, does having that make us feel more secure, or is it actually meaning that we're closer to engaging in warfare in some way?
Someone who's sat there who maybe is 13 years old, they might be asking the question, well, if they're so destructive, why do people have them? It's
kind of based on this idea of mutually assured destruction, or MAD, or kind of MAD, however you want to say it. The idea is that if one country has a nuclear weapon and you also have a nuclear weapon, so say country A and country B, country A isn't going to use their nuclear weapon against you, because they know that as soon as they fire one at you, you'll fire one back and you'll both be destroyed. It's this idea of, it makes me safer because the other person won't use it on me, because then I'll use it on them.
It's appropriately called MAD then.
Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah, I often think, you know, if you give two people a stick, you know, don't hit each other with those sticks, because you'll both just end up hurting each other. If they do start annoying each other, then eventually they probably will just hit each other with the sticks. It seems a very odd way of keeping yourself safe by making yourself more dangerous.
And how destructive it's worth asking this, how destructive are nuclear weapons?
Massively. In the Second World War, there were two bombs dropped, one on Hiroshima, one on Nagasaki in Japan, and you can see the city was completely destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of people just killed, and the after effects as well from radiation poisoning. Even today, people are still suffering the effects of the bombs through different forms of cancers and illnesses. So yes, it's really scary. That's something that we don't talk about.
I'm aware that we're not that far off from something like that happening.
I think it's always really interesting that people assume that everybody has nuclear weapons, and actually there's only 9 countries that actually own nuclear weapons.
So to use the stick analogy, you're trying to persuade 2 kids to put their sticks down, but the one that puts the stick down will say, well, hang on, this other kid's going to beat me if I put that down. And you're trying to persuade them to essentially make themselves vulnerable to the other. I'm sure that people in government or people who have these sorts of sticks would probably look at you and say, you're probably some sort of hippie offshoot. I mean, that's probably a misconception that's used about your perspective.
Yeah, so I think definitely there's the idea of we just live in a fantasy world and kind of we're not in tune with reality. I would say we're potentially more in tune with reality. We're aware of what the effect is, that fear that is created. We're working towards something that is more normal. Recently, there's been a big treaty at the UN. The full title is something like the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, which is a really long title. Many countries around the world, at the moment, I think we're on about 52, 53, have agreed they're not going to own nuclear weapons. They're not going to use nuclear weapons. They're not going to encourage other countries to have nuclear weapons. So what we're seeing is that actually globally, under international law, nuclear weapons are essentially becoming illegal. And I think that's the only way to work for it, I think, is to work globally. Because I think, like you said, nobody's going to want to lose theirs if somebody else has it.
Who are the 9 countries? I assume that England and America have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got... Go for it.
Yeah, go on. No, go on. It's better if you just say. So I'm just going to be guessing. I'll be saying, like, I'm half Mauritian, so I'll guess, do Mauritius have nuclear weapons?
I'm going to say no.
Fine, okay.
We've got the UK, the US, France, China, India, Pakistan, Russia, Israel, although I don't think they've officially confirmed it, so that's kind of expected. And I feel there's another country and I've forgotten it, because that was only 8.
Okay, so we'll maybe make that an interactive thing for people watching. They can look up the ninth country. Can we talk briefly about drones, please? Because you've done some work on this, haven't you, as an organisation?
We work especially with sort of other organisations. For example, there's Drone Wars UK. It's about trying to raise that awareness of these are drones and these are the worries, I suppose, that the concerns that we have. We've also done some work kind of education and different resources. So yeah, it's a lot of awareness raising.
What are the problems? I mean, I can imagine what they might be, but from your point of view?
A lot of it revolves around the idea of it being so removed. It kind of means that for the people who are sitting in their little stall kind of firing, obviously they're not in danger, but actually it means it's a lot easier in some ways to target people far away, and there's not that accountability. It's very easy to potentially make mistakes. It's often very traumatic and it puts civilians, like normal everyday people, at risk of potentially being caught in the crossfire. It kind of makes war easier. It means that there isn't...
And therefore more likely.
Yes, exactly. There's also that issue of it can be done a lot more easily and I suppose a lot more secretively, I suppose. Like, we don't know what's going on, so we just sort of ignore it and we can't see it. But actually, obviously, for the people in that situation, in countries where there are drones kind of flying overhead, it's a very different experience of what drones are.
If I'm understanding you correctly, as an organisation, what you're trying to do is bring a greater level of accountability to the use of technology.
Yeah, technology is great. There's amazing things we can do with drones, with photography and things, but actually it's also saying there is also a negative side to this and we think it is wrong and we think we should stop that.
Would you describe yourself as a pacifist?
Yeah, I would. There are a lot of kind of arguments around what pacifism is and kind of different forms of pacifism. Some people might say I'm not, because some people it's, absolute non-violence. Some people it's, sometimes it might be okay, or sometimes it's a lifestyle. But generally, yes.
So for someone who doesn't understand about pacifism and maybe has misconceptions in their head, give us as clear an idea of what you mean by pacifism, for a 13-year-old watching this.
Pacifism is about not using violence as a way to deal with conflict. Within that, there's all kinds of different, nuances and different opinions. But generally, it's the idea of not using violence. There's an argument that sometimes if you're a pacifist, you just sit back and let anybody do anything and, oh, it's fine if you hurt me. In Pax Christi, we talk about non-violence a lot. And it's this idea of we're not going to resort to violence, but we can still challenge when something is unjust. And so it's kind of using a whole range of tools. Protest, it might be campaigns, it could be being in solidarity with kind of other people. So it's kind of ways in which we can challenge things that aren't right, but we're not going to kind of cause harm or use violence to do that.
I've often heard the phrase might is right. Maybe it was in some action movie. I was watching a kung fu film the other day where someone punched someone a lot of times. And we have violence is in our culture, from games we play through to the way we talk, the language we use. Even if you're a fairly peaceful person, I think we have so much violence modeled for us at every pore of society. What's interesting about what you're saying is pacifism says it kind of rejects that tidal wave, and it says, okay, there are other ways to bring this about. You don't have to just be the toughest kid with the biggest stick.
Yeah, I think that's a really good kind of way of putting it. I think often people think pacifism is quite weak, but I think actually it takes a lot of courage, I think, to still sort of stand up against that and say no. And so I think it's about how we define, what is strength? Is it about being courageous and about standing up for what you believe in and kind of being willing to face the consequences? Or is it just hitting someone? What does it really mean to be strong? I think that's a really interesting discussion as well.
I'm going to ask you a bit more about that then, and maybe we'll finish on this. For you personally, where does that strength come from?
I think from a couple of places. Pax Christi is a Catholic organisation, and kind of I myself am too. So I think there is that religious background can kind of support you in that. That there is a reason behind why I'm doing this. And I think that gives people strength. But I think also working with others, and I think I kind of mentioned this earlier as well, the idea of coming together and having a community that are working towards something.
Like you say, the 50 odd countries that sign up to nuclear disarmament, that there's a sense of community there, isn't there?
Definitely, yeah. So I think that the idea of a global kind of community and even just the people around you, amazing people working for peace just in everybody's community. And it's maybe kind of finding those people and coming together helps to give people that strength.
Well, I hope you found that interesting. I have been really helped by the opportunity to speak to Aisling about these things. I asked Aisling if she'd give me a few extra links and things which I'm going to post on the blog page for you to have a look at if you want to follow any of this stuff up. But I do encourage you to have a think about the culture that we live in. Is it that we have become so immersed in violence that we just don't see it? And when someone is pacifist, they just come across as being really weird, where actually it should actually be the other way around. Anyway, see you next time, and thanks again for listening.